My name is Lydia Harper, 45 years old, single mom, former military, and up until a few months ago, I honestly believed I understood how corporate America worked. I thought that if I worked hard, carried more weight than everyone else, and pulled the company through crisis after crisis, then eventually someone would notice. I believed that for 7 years at Northbridge Analytics. And then one day, I realized how wrong I had been. Northbridge is a data analytics firm in Austin, Texas. When I joined, the operations department was a worn-out machine running on fumes. Processes were a mess, documentation didn't exist, and anyone who left took their knowledge with them. I had spent 12 years in the Air Force handling logistics, so rebuilding a broken system wasn't unfamiliar territory. What I didn't expect was doing it almost entirely alone for years, simply because I did it well enough that no one felt the need to fix anything. It took me 6 months to rewrite procedures, build documentation, set up tracking systems, and train new hires. By the time I got home each night, I was exhausted. Ivy, my daughter, was 8 when I started at Northbridge. She used to run to the door and hug me every night. Later, she just sat at the kitchen table with her homework and looked up to ask why I was late again. Those questions stung, but I kept telling myself that if I worked hard now, our future would be better. 3 years ago, Kyle Benton became our operations director. Kyle was 3 years older than me, polished, confident, always talking about vision and strategy. In every meeting, he brought out colorful slides, tech trends, and management frameworks. The only thing he never bothered to understand was how our internal systems worked. He didn't have to. I had kept everything running too smoothly. To him, I was like the automatic brake he never noticed while he drove. Then, earlier this year, Northbridge hired Olivia Crane as an up-and-coming strategist. 27 years old, Harvard degree, sharp, charming, excellent at presenting, and even better at winning over people above her. The moment I met her, I knew she wasn't incompetent. She was smart, brilliant even, when it came to analysis and modeling. But she had zero real operational experience. She had never handled a 3 in the morning incident call, never calmed an angry client on the verge of canceling a contract, never lived inside a system where one mistake multiplies into 50. None of that was Olivia's fault. It was simply the gap between theory and reality. In April, it was time to review candidates for the senior operations manager role. I spent a full week preparing my portfolio, year-over-year performance improvements, error rate reductions under 10%, long-term client feedback, including a major partner who sent a thank you letter with my name on it. I walked into that evaluation meeting with the steady mindset the military had drilled into me. Numbers and results should have spoken for themselves. Kyle skimmed my file for less than 5 minutes. Then he closed it, leaned back, folded his arms, and spoke without hesitation. Lydia, you have done excellent work. No one denies that. But to move this department forward, we need fresher thinking. Olivia has the strategic capability we are looking for. She will be taking the senior manager role. I asked him, and what about me? He smiled like I had asked him something simple. You will continue in your current position. Olivia will need someone experienced to guide her through her first few months. Can you prepare her training materials by this weekend? I didn't speak for a few seconds. I just looked at him. And somehow, instead of anger, I felt hollow. I stood up, said I understood, thanked him for the feedback, and walked out. My plan was to return to my desk. Instead, my feet carried me to the parking lot. I sat in my car for almost half an hour. Ivy texted me saying she had rehearsed for her music performance next week and wanted me to listen that night. I read that message 3 times. I had missed things I should have been there for, more than I ever let myself admit. That night, I came home earlier than usual. Ivy looked surprised and asked a question that felt like someone pressing a fist into my chest. Mom, do you ever choose me over work? I couldn't answer right away. I just pulled her into my arms. And in that moment, I knew I had reached the biggest crossroads of my career. I wasn't going to quit, but I was done doing the thing this company had relied on for years. I was done saving them for free. If you are still listening, maybe you have had your own moment where you had to ask what you are really living for. Tell me where you are listening from. I would genuinely love to know. And if stories about waking up, standing your ground, and quietly fighting back against unfairness speak to you, don't forget to subscribe. This journey has a lot more to tell. The new week started with a completely different energy. I walked into the office at 9 in the morning, not a minute earlier like the old version of me would have. No more bringing a laptop home for weekend work. No more checking the system at 6. I entered that building as if I were test driving a new version of myself, one no longer powered by silent obligation. Olivia showed up at my doorway a few minutes after I sat down. She wore a cream jacket, perfectly put together, holding a fresh notebook. Kyle wants us to meet at 10, she said. He needs to discuss transition and onboarding. I nodded. She watched me like she wanted to say something else, but was not sure she should. Eventually, she gave a polite smile and stepped back. At exactly 10, I walked into the conference room. Kyle sat at the head of the table, trying to look calm, though I could see the impatience behind his eyes. Olivia sat beside him, laptop open and ready. Lydia, we need to go over your support for Olivia during her first 6 weeks, Kyle said as soon as I pulled out a chair. Mainly operational workflows, documentation, and the Argus data account. I asked evenly what specific tasks he wanted me to prioritize. That caught him off guard. He was used to me anticipating everything, fixing problems before they surfaced, carrying the load so completely that he forgot it weighed anything. Now, when I asked only for what fell under my responsibility, he suddenly had nothing to lean on. We will start with the basic workflows. And Lydia, I think you should review the error logs for me this week, he added. I wrote it down and replied that if it were part of my role, I would do it. If it fell outside my scope, I would pass it to the person responsible. Kyle frowned slightly. Olivia looked down at her keyboard to hide her discomfort. After the meeting, she caught up with me in the hallway. Lydia, I am sorry if the promotion situation made things awkward. I do not want you to think I was trying to take your place. I looked at her. None of this was her fault. But I was done shielding people from the consequences of their own choices. I said I would support her within my scope, but I would not do her work for her. She needed to own her responsibilities. She went quiet for a few seconds before nodding. She was not incapable. She was simply facing real pressure without the safety net she had grown used to. By midday, small system errors started popping up. Before, I would have fixed them before anyone noticed. Today, I notified the on-call engineering team according to protocol. They asked if I could handle it since they were busy testing new software. I told them I had already assigned it to the correct team. Some people looked openly disappointed, as if they could not understand why I had stopped being the free firefighter. Around 2 in the afternoon, Kyle messaged me asking why the issue still had not been resolved. I replied that it was the engineering team's responsibility. I had already alerted them. He did not respond. But I knew he was irritated. Maybe for the first time in years, he had to face the fact that this department could not run on one person's shoulders. A little later, Olivia appeared at my desk again, worry tightening her features. Argus data needs an update. I do not know where to pull the data set. Can you show me? I handed her the account management guide I had built. Everything is in here. Read each step and follow it. If something does not make sense, you can ask, but I will not do it for you. She thanked me and went back to her desk, studying the document like it were an exam she had to pass. Watching her, I realized she was not lacking ability. She just had never been pushed to carry real weight. The afternoon unfolded in familiar chaos, but this time I watched from the outside. Emails about technical issues flooded my inbox. I forwarded each one to the correct department. They took longer than I ever had, but that was how it should have been all along. A coworker said near the coffee station that the week felt messier than usual. I smiled. Things were not messy because I changed. They were messy because everyone else was finally seeing the invisible work I had been doing for years. When the day ended, I went home on time. Ivy sat in the living room, practicing for her performance. I sat beside her and listened quietly. She stopped halfway through and smiled when she realized I was actually paying attention. Can you hear me, Mom? She asked. I held her hand and said, I am here. I am listening to every note. She leaned her head on my shoulder. In that moment, a hollow space I had carried for years finally felt full. After dinner, I sat at the table with a stack of company documents. I stared at them for a moment, then closed the folder. I did not need to prove anything anymore. I was done chasing recognition from people who would never look up long enough to see me. Late that night, Ivy's question returned. Mom, do you ever choose me over work? It lingered like a small truth refusing to be ignored. I knew I did not want to sacrifice another moment of her life. Tomorrow, the company might be even more chaotic. Kyle might be more irritated. Olivia might be more overwhelmed. But I had no intention of carrying them through every crisis anymore. I would do my part. The rest was theirs to learn. And this was only the beginning. The following days at Northbridge felt like a long experiment where everyone already knew the outcome would be bad. The moment I stopped being the official firefighter of the entire department, the cracks that had existed for years showed up like fractures in a road after heavy rain. And the first person to lose his composure, unsurprisingly, was Kyle. On Monday morning, I had just hung up my coat and had not even opened my computer when Kyle appeared in the doorway of my small office. He did not knock, did not say hello, just stood there blocking the entrance. "We need to talk, Lydia." His voice was tight as a drawn wire. I invited him in, even though what I really wanted was to finish my coffee before listening to another complaint. Kyle stood in front of my desk with his arms crossed like a teacher about to scold a student. "I heard you pushed a bunch of requests to other departments last week, tasks you use to handle every day," I answered simply. "I returned the work to where it actually belongs." Kyle narrowed his eyes. "That slows down the workflow." My tone stayed calm, almost polite. "If a process only runs smoothly when one person carries the load of every department, then the problem is not me." Kyle inhaled sharply, trying not to show he was irritated. It was painfully clear he was not used to hearing me say no. "Lydia, Olivia is new. She needs help. You should be more flexible." I looked directly at him. "I am helping, but I cannot replace the entire engineering team, the finance team, and the product team. Olivia needs to learn how to handle her own work." Kyle stayed silent for a moment, then walked away, clearly unhappy. But I knew this was not the end of it. That afternoon, the first incident hit. Argus Data's reporting system suddenly failed to sync, pausing their entire platform. 3 engineers spent nearly 2 hours struggling without finding the cause. A few years ago, they would have called me instantly, and I would have fixed it in 10 minutes. This time, I simply observed from a distance. Within 5 minutes, Olivia rushed to my desk, gripping a stack of files like she was afraid they would fall apart. "Lydia, I think it is connected to the configuration you adjusted last year. Can you check for me?" I scanned the error description. "No. This belongs to the engineering team. They need to identify the root cause before I support the assessment." Olivia looked visibly disappointed, but she nodded and walked away. I knew she was under pressure from Kyle, but I also knew she would not learn anything if I kept doing her job. By 4 in the afternoon, Kyle called an emergency meeting. When I walked in, everyone looked at me as if I were the only person capable of saving the situation. Kyle stood at the head of the table, tension all over his face. "We are dealing with a serious problem. Argus wants an update within 1 hour. If the issue is not resolved, they might pull the contract." He stared right at me. "Lydia, you handled this configuration before, did you not?" "Yes. But this issue has nothing to do with that part." Kyle kept pushing. "Can you help the engineers move faster?" I responded immediately. "I will support them once they identify the root cause. I will not do the work of another department." A strange silence spread through the room, not because they blamed me, but because they were not used to me not stepping in to fix everything. Kyle's face turned red. "Lydia, we are a team." I gave a faint smile, and in a team, everyone does their share. The meeting ended with the air so tight it felt solid. That evening, I went home early. Ivy was practicing for her upcoming performance. When she saw me, she laughed and pulled me over to listen. I watched her bright face and felt certain I was going in the right direction. I was no longer drained from putting out endless, nameless fires. The next morning, the chaos escalated. Argus sent an escalated complaint demanding an immediate meeting with the highest technical lead. Olivia went pale when she read the email and reported to Kyle. I stood close enough to hear Kyle raising his voice, trying to hide how panicked he really was. By noon, the engineering team finally found the cause. A new update had clashed with an old API. They sent the report to me. After a few seconds of reading, I knew exactly what to do. Olivia brought the report to my desk, almost pleading. Lydia, can you guide me? The engineering team says they need operations to confirm. I pointed to two key sections. Tell them to back up first, then follow this sequence. It will take about an hour. Olivia followed every step, and an hour later, the system was back online. But I knew no one would feel relieved for long. At the end of the day, Kyle called me into his office. Lydia, this situation is not sustainable. I want you to go back to the way you worked before, at least until Olivia is fully settled. I looked at him, this time without avoiding anything. Kyle, I did not create this chaos. I simply stopped doing the work of three departments. You are finally seeing the reality you refused to see. Kyle clenched his jaw. You are being defiant. I shook my head. I am letting people be responsible for their own roles. He stepped closer, placing a hand on the desk, his voice low but threatening. I am your manager, and I need you to be flexible. I answered slowly, every word sharp enough to cut through fog. Flexibility does not mean letting people take advantage. Kyle froze for a brief second. Not because I was wrong, but because it was the first time I had ever said it out loud. I walked out of his office with light steps. Behind me, the door closed, and I knew he would push back harder next time. But I also knew something else. I was finally ready for the next wave of chaos. After the tense conversation with Kyle, I knew he would not let it go. And just as I expected, his reaction came the very next morning. The moment I stepped into the office, Olivia rushed toward me, her face full of worry. Lydia, Kyle wants you in the large conference room right now. Megan Slater is there too. That name made me pause. Megan was the regional director, someone not easily swayed by emotion. I walked into the room, and Kyle was already seated, trying to hold himself together. Megan opened her laptop, her sharp eyes focused on me. Lydia, I received several reports that you have changed your working approach and slowed down cross-department processes. I want to hear from you directly. Kyle jumped in before I could respond. This past week, Lydia pushed everything back to the other teams. She knows they are not used to handling those tasks, so everything fell apart. I answered calmly. I simply returned the work to where it belonged. No one was given anything outside their responsibility. Megan turned to Kyle. You are saying Lydia caused the Argus incident? Kyle nodded. If she had worked the way she used to, Argus would not have been left waiting for an entire hour. I placed my hand on the table and kept my voice steady. The Argus issue was caused by an engineering update. I supported them once the root cause was identified, and the entire workflow has been documented by me for over 2 years. Megan reviewed the technical report. According to the lead engineer, Lydia advised correctly and promptly. Kyle, an entire department relying on one person is a sign of weak management, not an employee problem. The comment froze Kyle in place. Olivia, standing by the door, heard it too and bowed her head. Megan continued. Lydia, why did you change the way you work? I answered openly. Because I have been doing the work of 3 departments for years without any adjustment to my job description or compensation. And when Kyle promoted Olivia, I was asked to work weekends to train the person taking my role. I needed to set boundaries. Kyle shot up from his chair. You got me reprimanded. I looked at him without softening. If you were reprimanded because of overdependence, that falls under your management duties. Megan stood. Lydia, you may return to work. Kyle, I want to speak with you privately. I left the room without looking back. Not because I had won, but because, for the first time, someone finally saw what I had been carrying, alone for far too long. An hour later, Kyle appeared in my doorway. His face was tight with anger. Lydia, you seem very pleased that I was written up. I responded evenly. I am not pleased. I am simply no longer carrying your responsibilities for you. Kyle let out a humorless laugh. You are making everything harder. No, I am letting everything function the way it is supposed to. For the first time, Kyle had nothing to say. He turned and walked off, but I knew this was far from over. That afternoon, Olivia stepped into my office. Unlike usual, she no longer carried that effortless confidence. Lydia, I am sorry. I did not know Kyle reported things that way. I shook my head. You did not cause this. Olivia swallowed, her voice low. I want to do well, but it is too much. I know I do not have enough experience. I looked at the young woman in front of me. She had not been trying to lean on me. She had simply been placed in a role too soon. You have to learn to stand on your own. I will guide you, but I will not do it for you. Olivia nodded, genuine in a way I rarely saw from her. Thank you. I know you are under pressure because of me. I answered. It is not because of you. It is because of this system. I thought things might settle for a while, but the next hit came quicker than I expected. Around 4 in the afternoon, Human Resources sent me an email, a request to join an unusual performance review. This was not a standard process. It only happened when management wanted to build a file against an employee before issuing a warning or demotion. Kyle was preparing a case against me. I read the email without surprise. Kyle had never handled pressure with any real strategy. That evening, I went home earlier than usual. Ivy was practicing a solo piece in the living room. When she saw me, she looked surprised. You are home early? I sat beside her, stretched my legs, and let out a slow breath. Yes, I am trying to change a few things. Ivy leaned her head on my shoulder as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Do not work yourself sick anymore. I do not like seeing you that way. I wrapped my arm around her. Those words cut deeper than anything Kyle had said. And right then, I knew one thing. I would not let Kyle drag me back into the old cycle. I had already begun to change, and I would see it through. The next morning, before the performance review, I prepared a thick file documenting every task I had taken on beyond my job description for the past 4 years. Clear evidence, specific data. I had built it from scratch. Everything was ready. I knew what Kyle wanted, and I also knew he had underestimated me once again. Kyle always assumed I was too busy to defend myself. But this time, I was not busy. I was prepared. I would walk into that meeting and lay the truth on the table in a way no one could ignore. The performance review took place on Friday morning in a small meeting room beside the Human Resources office. When I walked in, Kyle was already there, arms crossed as if he held every advantage. Beside him sat Donna, the Human Resources manager, calm as always, and loyal to procedure to a fault. Donna invited me to sit, then opened her laptop. Lydia, this is an unusual performance review requested by your direct manager. We will be evaluating collaboration, support, and responsibility during the past week. Kyle jumped in immediately, his voice forced into a tone of fake objectivity. I just want things to be clear. This week, Lydia refused to support other departments, causing delays and affecting a major client. I believe that shows a lack of teamwork. Donna typed without expression. I waited until he finished, then opened the thick file I had prepared. Kyle noticed the stack of papers in my hands, and a flicker of worry crossed his face. I began. Before we discuss this week, I want to present an overview of the tasks I have handled over the past 4 years, most of them outside my job description. I placed the file on the table. Donna pulled it closer and started reading. I did not speak. I let the facts speak for me. After a few minutes, Donna looked up. Lydia, you handled deployment and troubleshooting for 7 different systems? But your job description only includes reporting operations. I nodded. That is correct. I did that because the engineering team was understaffed and clients needed quick responses. I also listed the start date for every responsibility beyond my role. Kyle cut in quickly, but that was her choice. No one forced her to take on more. I looked at him, calmer than he wanted me to be. No one forced me, but you relied on it. You used it as a reason to assign me even more. And when I stopped doing work outside my scope, you called it a lack of teamwork. Donna set her pen down. Kyle, do you have an explanation? Kyle kept his tone rigid. Human Resources does not understand the full picture. Lydia is the only one who can solve these issues. When she stopped, the other departments lacked information. I have to keep things running. Donna examined him the way someone examines a flawed equation. And that is why the job description needs adjustment, not why an employee should be written up. The energy in the room shifted instantly. Kyle realized his plan was falling apart. I continued. I also want to submit these email exchanges from last week, showing that I did not refuse support. I only asked each department to complete their part before I stepped in. I handed over copies of the engineering team's emails, confirming the Argus issue was not caused by me. Donna read every page carefully. Lydia followed the correct procedure, Donna said, and I see no sign of a lack of cooperation. Kyle began to lose his composure. We cannot rely on engineering for this. I am her direct manager. I see clearly that Lydia has changed her attitude. I looked directly at him. I have not changed my attitude. I stopped doing 3 jobs at once. Kyle clenched his jaw. You are defying me, Lydia. My voice softened, but the edge was still there. I am protecting my time and my responsibilities, and everyone else's. Donna stepped in. Kyle, I need to remind you that using a performance review as a way to apply personal pressure violates policy. Kyle deflated, though he still looked like he wanted to argue. But he had nothing left that made sense. Donna turned to me. Lydia, we will log your documentation and request an updated job description. There is no indication of any violation. This review is concluded. I thanked her and stood. Kyle did not look at me. Maybe he did not want me to see the defeat in his eyes. But the storm was not over. That afternoon, I received a message from Evan, the engineering lead, a quiet man, but fair to the bone. Lydia, you should take a look at this. He sent me a system log, a configuration change record from the previous week. There was an unusual edit made from a management account, Kyle's account. I called Evan immediately. Evan, what is this change? He hesitated. It is a small modification to the API control section. Not enough to break anything, but enough to trigger false system alerts. And false alerts slow things down. But why would Kyle touch it? Evan exhaled. I do not know. But if you were going to be blamed for the Argus issue, this is suspicious. I tightened my grip on the phone. Are you saying Kyle may have interfered to make the situation worse? Evan did not answer outright. I am saying the change is unusual, and I thought you should know. Evan never spoke without reason. A cold wave ran through me. If Kyle had deliberately tampered with the system, even slightly, to create or worsen an incident just to pin it on me, then this was no longer an internal dispute. This was misconduct, and it could lead to serious consequences. That evening, I did not go home right away. I stayed at my desk, reviewing every line in the log Evan sent. Each line felt like peeling back another layer of something Kyle had been hiding. Nothing was proven outright, but nothing was a harmless coincidence either. Whatever the truth was, one thing was clear. Kyle had crossed a line, and I was not going to let him drag me down because he could not face the reality that the system he managed had been collapsing for years. I closed my laptop and stood. There are moments when a person must decide to stand on the side of what is right, even when it makes the path more difficult. I had reached that moment, and I was no longer afraid. That evening, after a long and exhausting day, I sat alone in the living room, opened my laptop, and reviewed the logs Evan had sent me. The more I read, the colder I felt. It was not the numbers or the complex lines of code. It was what they suggested. Kyle was not just irresponsible. He was creating chaos on purpose. I knew I could not ignore it, but I also knew that if I confronted him directly, he would twist the story until I became the villain. I needed undeniable proof and a strategy that left no room for his games. The next morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual. The place was dark, lit only by the faint green glow of exit lights reflecting off desk surfaces. I sat down and organized everything I had: the Argus West malfunction, the exact time of Kyle's unauthorized access, and the accusations he tried to pin on me. While I was taking notes, Olivia appeared at my door, her face pale with worry. Lydia, Kyle seemed furious yesterday. I am scared. I looked at her, keeping my voice steady. It is all right. Do not worry too much. But she hesitated, then spoke softly. Last night, I saw Kyle using a special access level. I do not know what he was doing, but the timing matched the warning alert. I straightened. Did you save anything? She shook her head. No, I only saw it on the dashboard by accident. But it did not feel right. I answered gently. All right, Olivia. Do not mention this to anyone, not even Kyle. She nodded quickly and backed away from the door. Her fear was not unfounded, and it only confirmed that I was closer to something Kyle desperately wanted hidden. By mid-morning, Evan called me down to the engineering room. He pushed his chair back and turned the monitor toward me. I found this, he said. On the screen was a log showing Kyle's account bypassing a mandatory authentication step. No employee except the highest level admins could do that. I asked him, do you think he did it intentionally? Evan folded his arms. I cannot say for certain, but if someone wanted to cause disruption and pin it on another person, this would be exactly how they would do it. I thanked him and left. The pieces were forming a clear picture, but not enough. I needed something that could not be denied. Near the end of the afternoon, Megan called me into her office. She looked at me for a long moment before speaking. Lydia, I reviewed the human resources report, and I also reviewed the documents you submitted yesterday. Several details do not match what Kyle reported. I waited quietly. I have decided to open an internal investigation into the operations department. Not just the workflow, but Kyle's management conduct. I inhaled slowly. That meant Kyle would know immediately, and he would react badly. I opened my laptop and showed Megan the logs Evan had collected. I explained every line, every timestamp, and every sign of unauthorized access. Megan studied them carefully, her expression unreadable. Finally, she spoke. These findings will be forwarded to internal controls. From this point on, you do not need to handle this alone. I nodded, knowing full well the storm was just beginning. As I packed up to go home, Kyle appeared at my door. His eyes were sharp, filled with anger. What are you doing behind my back? I set my bag down and stood tall. I am doing my job. Kyle stepped closer, his voice drenched in threat. What did you give Megan? I did not answer. I did not need to. My silence made him even more unsteady. You think you have won? I am your manager. I will not let you ruin this department. I met his stare. Kyle, the dependency you created is what ruined this department, not me. His grip tightened on the strap of his briefcase. You are digging your own grave. I walked past him, my voice firm. No, Kyle. I am stepping out of the grave you kept me in for 4 years. Kyle stayed frozen, as if this was the first time he realized he no longer controlled the situation. That evening, I picked up Ivy from her rehearsal. She chattered happily about her new song while I drove, feeling a calm I had not felt in years. When we reached home, Ivy looked up at me. Mom, are you happier now? I brushed her hair back and smiled. Yes, I am trying to be happier every day. She hugged me, unaware that behind my smile a battle was unfolding. The next morning, the news of Megan opening an internal investigation spread through the office. People whispered in every corner. The air felt stretched to its breaking point. Kyle walked the hallway with a hardened expression, his phone ringing nonstop, while Olivia avoided his gaze like she was afraid of being pulled into the chaos. I was strangely calm, not because I knew I would win, but because I knew I had done the right thing. When Megan stepped out of the conference room with two members of internal controls, I knew the most critical phase had begun. No more hiding, no more convenient blame, no more secret modifications in the dark, and this time I would not step back. The internal investigation moved faster than I expected. On Monday morning, an internal notice went out requiring every employee in the operations department to provide information about incidents from the past 3 months. The atmosphere in the company changed instantly. People whispered, watched, and hesitated. But the most noticeable person was Kyle. He looked like someone pushed to the edge, trying hard to stay composed, yet every step carried frustration. I was standing by the coffee machine when I heard him walk in. I did not need to turn around. I knew. Are you satisfied now? Kyle said, his voice so cold it froze the air in the small kitchen. I picked up my coffee without looking at him. If you are asking about the investigation, that was Megan's decision. Kyle let out a dry laugh. Megan trusts you far too much. What did you pull? I turned and looked him straight in the eyes. I did not pull anything. I presented the truth. And you know the system was tampered with, Kyle. He frowned, but said nothing. Instead, he stepped closer, closer than necessary. You think they are going to side with you? You are just a small employee on the 10th floor. I can put everything back where it belongs. My voice was quiet but sharper than he expected. Yes, I am a 10th floor employee, but I am also the person you relied on for years. And now everyone sees it. Kyle clenched his jaw and walked away. But I knew it was far from over. By noon, Megan called me into a small conference room. Sitting with her were two people from internal controls, a short-haired woman and a man with glasses, both serious. Megan gestured for me to sit. We would like to ask you some questions about the processes you handled over the past year, she said. The discussion lasted nearly an hour. They asked about system permissions, the timeline around the Argus incident, and the additional duties Kyle assigned to me outside my official role. Every question was careful, methodical. When it ended, the man with glasses nodded slightly. Your information is important. We need to cross check it with log data and other statements. The short haired woman added, and we will review every unusual access attempt in recent weeks. I nodded and stood. Outside the room, I saw Kyle standing in the hallway, hands in his pockets, staring at me as if he could burn a hole through me. He did not speak, but his eyes said everything. He was losing control. That afternoon, Olivia knocked softly on my door. Lydia, I need to talk. She closed the door, her voice trembling. Kyle told me to sign a statement. He wrote that you broke protocol and caused the system error. He said if I did not sign, he would transfer me to another branch. My heart pounded. Did you sign it? Olivia shook her head. No, I do not want to lie, but I am scared he will punish me. I stood and placed a hand on her shoulder. Olivia, do not sign anything. If anyone pressures you, go straight to Megan. This investigation is here to protect the truth, not to let someone abuse power. Olivia bit her lip, then nodded quietly. I trust you. When she left, I knew something for certain. Kyle was desperate enough to drag his subordinates into his mess. Near the end of the day, internal controls sent an email to the entire department requesting system access logs for 90 days. A few employees panicked, running up and down the hall asking what was happening. I kept working quietly, but inside I knew every trace Kyle left behind would soon be exposed. While I was focused, my desk phone rang. Megan, Lydia, can you come to my office? I walked in, and she closed the door behind me. Her expression was different, more serious. I want you to hear this from me first, she said. Kyle has filed an official complaint accusing you of undermining his authority and damaging his reputation. I stood still for a few seconds, not surprised, but still bitter. Megan continued. At the same time, internal controls just found irregularities in Kyle's account. Some actions were assigned permissions they should not have had. We are verifying. I asked, does that mean he may have altered his own permissions? Megan nodded lightly. It is possible, and if that is true, this will not stay at the departmental level. It will escalate to a higher review. I exhaled slowly. For nearly 3 months, Kyle had cornered me, and now the evidence was cornering him. I left the office late that evening. As I walked into the parking garage, I saw Kyle leaning against his car. His eyes were sharp, full of defiance. But something else lingered there too, fear. He spoke first. You think you are getting out of this? I opened my car door. Kyle, I am not running. I am not the one who needs to. He narrowed his eyes. You think Megan will protect you forever? You are just a temporary tool. When this blows over, they will forget you. I looked at him steadily, calm. If you are so confident, Kyle, then why are you standing here saying all this to me? He stiffened, as if I had exposed something he did not want to admit. I continued. I am not running. But it seems like you are starting to be afraid. His face paled, and he turned away without another word. That night, when I got home, Ivy was eating dinner and waved at me with a bright smile. Just that simple moment loosened the weight of the entire day. After she went to bed, I sat at my desk and looked back on everything that had happened during the hardest 7 days I had experienced in years, and I understood something. I was no longer the person who tried to save everything alone. I stepped back, and the truth revealed itself. Kyle could fight, could resist, but he was losing control, and at the end of this path, only two things stood firm: the evidence and my resolve. The internal investigation moved into its second week, and the entire atmosphere of the company shifted. Hallways that used to buzz with noise were now so quiet you could hear the printer from the next room. People were called up to the 11th floor at different times, and Kyle had been absent since the start of the week. Rumors that he had been told to work remotely spread fast, leaving the department both unsettled and strangely relieved. I tried to focus on my work, but it was impossible to ignore the tension in every breath in the office. On Tuesday morning, while I was finishing a report for the North Bridge project, I received a message from Megan asking me to come to her office. When I stepped inside, Megan was reviewing a thick folder. She motioned to the chair. Lydia, the internal controls team has a preliminary analysis. I think you should see this. She turned her screen toward me. On it was a summary of unauthorized access attempts from secondary accounts, all tied to Kyle. I asked, did they confirm the source? Megan nodded. Most of them came from Kyle's device, and some of the actions were impossible to perform unless someone deliberately bypassed permissions. I stayed silent for a moment, not because I was shocked, but because of how serious his actions really were. Megan continued, they also found entries that had been removed from the main log, but the automated backups recovered a significant portion. This will be reviewed at a higher level. I understood immediately. This had moved beyond departmental territory. That afternoon, Evan messaged me to come to engineering. Important. Come now, he wrote. When I arrived, Evan and another engineer were staring at a screen. Evan spoke right away. We recovered another segment of the log. You need to see this. He opened the file. It was a record of Kyle using a hidden account to manually override permissions at the exact moment the Argus West incident occurred. I recognized it instantly. This is the decisive part. Evan nodded. It will be included in the attached report. I wanted you to know ahead of time so you can be prepared. I thanked him. Evan was not someone who spoke unnecessarily, so his warning only confirmed that the truth was falling into place. Later that afternoon, as I was pouring water in the break room, Kyle appeared suddenly. He no longer carried his usual confidence. His eyes held exhaustion, bitterness, and a hint of fear. How far are you trying to destroy me? He asked bluntly. I kept my voice steady. I am not destroying you, Kyle. I am simply not covering for you anymore. He clenched his jaw. What did Evan give you? I met his stare. The truth. Kyle stepped closer. You think Megan will protect you forever? My tone stayed calm. Kyle, if you truly believe that, you would not be this worried. You would not be asking me these questions. For the first time, he had no response. He turned away, gripping his phone as he left the room. The next morning, Megan held an unexpected meeting with the entire operations department. Everyone stood together as she walked in, her expression firm. I will be direct, she began. The internal investigation has completed its first verification phase. There is evidence that certain processes were altered intentionally and reports were manipulated. The room went absolutely silent. Megan continued. Due to the seriousness of these findings, we have temporarily suspended Kyle's system access while the investigation moves to the corporate level. Some employees gasped softly, others exchanged stunned looks. Then she turned to me. While we await further decisions, Lydia will assume coordination of the operations department. I stood, feeling dozens of eyes on me. Strangely, I did not feel the fear I once would have, only a calm acceptance. I said, I will do my best to keep everything running steadily. Thank you all for your cooperation during this difficult time. A few employees nodded, even gave faint smiles. Megan ended the meeting with a short, grounded message. We need unity. Let the truth lead us. No one is punished for doing what is right. That evening, I left earlier than I had in days. When I arrived at the art center to pick up Ivy, she ran toward me and wrapped her arms around my waist. Are you happy today, Mom? She asked. I looked at her small face, her bright eyes untouched by the complications of adult life. I smiled. Today I feel lighter. Just a little, but it feels real. Ivy nodded eagerly. Then let us go home and eat noodles. I am hungry. I laughed and lifted her up. All right, let us go home. Walking down the road as the sky turned dark and streetlights shimmered across the wet pavement, I felt something I had not allowed myself to believe in for a long time. I was stepping out of the shadow Kyle had kept me in for years. The investigation was not over. Storms still lie ahead. But for the first time, I stood firmly on the side of the truth, and I was no longer alone. The internal investigation continued for another week before Northbridge sent out a notice summoning the entire operations staff for a department meeting. No one said it aloud, but everyone knew the conclusion was near. That morning, as I stepped into the large conference room, people looked at me, then quickly looked away, as if afraid their gaze might add pressure. I understood. No one wanted to stand between the two sides at a time like this. Megan was already seated at the head of the table, calm but resolute. Beside her were representatives from legal and internal controls. Kyle had been required to attend as well, though he sat silently, hands clasped, face ashen. When the wall clock struck 9, the head of internal controls stood, his voice steady and unmistakably clear. After reviewing the full system, tracing all access logs, and comparing them with the permission structure provided by operations, we have determined that one employee repeatedly logged in without authorization, modified settings, and caused workflow disruptions. The room fell silent. I could hear Kyle swallow. That employee is Kyle Anderson. Kyle shot up from his chair. That is impossible. I did not do anything wrong. The system recorded it incorrectly. Someone set me up. The lead investigator did not flinch. We have evidence from multiple sources, not only system logs, but also verification from the third-party software provider. Every intervention originated from your account. Kyle turned sharply toward me. Her. She wants me out. She hates that the management liked me more than her. Megan stood immediately. Kyle, stop. Lydia did not manipulate any data. She does not even have the permissions to do so, and you know that. Kyle tried to hold on to whatever power he thought he still had. What about the wrong permissions? The errors? I cannot be the only one responsible. The lead investigator opened a thick folder. Correct. You are not the only one responsible, but you are the only one who covered up your mistakes by creating secondary accounts and altering reports to shift blame. These entries match the exact timestamps of your logins. The room tightened with a heavy, breathless silence. Kyle froze, his face turning pale. He looked around, but no one backed him. The legal representative spoke. Northbridge will proceed with the termination of Kyle Anderson, effective immediately. Kyle no longer protested. His head dropped as if he finally understood the end had arrived. Security entered to escort him out. The door closing behind him felt like a clean punctuation mark. Megan turned to me, her expression softer. Thank you, Lydia. Without your documentation, it might have taken us months to uncover the truth. I gave a small smile. After years of being treated like a silent firefighter, being formally acknowledged felt unexpectedly meaningful. That afternoon, Megan called me to her office. You know why I wanted to speak privately, do you? I nodded slightly, though my heart beat faster. She placed a letter in front of me. The corporate team met this morning. They have decided to appoint you as interim operations manager for 6 months. After that, they will review for a permanent placement. I looked at the document without speaking. I had carried the weight of the department for years. Being officially recognized felt both familiar and foreign. But Megan was not finished. There is something more important, Lydia. You now have full authority to rebuild the operations structure. System permissions, team training, oversight mechanisms, all of it. I looked at her for a long moment. You trust me that much? No, Megan said. I do not just trust you, I know. This department stands where it stands today largely because of you. Her words struck a place deep inside me, a place I had spent years convincing myself did not matter. I said, I accept. But I want a transparent and fair foundation. No more unchecked authority. No more one person carrying the entire load. Exactly what I hoped to hear, Megan smiled. On my first day in the new role, the entire operations team gathered in the meeting room. They did not know what changes I would bring. Their eyes held uncertainty, but also a quiet hope. I began. We will rebuild system permissions from the ground up. Clear, transparent, no uncontrolled privileges. Everyone follows the same rules. When we do our part, the work becomes lighter, better. When we do not, the entire department pays the price. I looked at each of them. Starting today, no one carries the work of the entire group alone. Good work will be recognized, and mistakes will be owned, honestly. Evan nodded first. Olivia smiled faintly. A quiet sense of stability filled the room. We began rebuilding the system from the foundation. And once everything was clear, with no loopholes, I realized the operations department had never been chaotic. Someone had simply made it chaotic. 3 months later, Northbridge looked different. Teams worked smoothly, errors dropped significantly, and the constant firefighting vanished. Evan was promoted to team lead. Olivia took over training of the new processes. One afternoon, Megan stopped by and said, "The corporate board is very pleased. Your permanent appointment will be announced at next month's meeting." I smiled, but what I felt most was relief, not pride. I no longer needed recognition to prove my worth. I had already seen it in myself the moment I chose to fight for what was right. That evening, I picked up Ivy earlier than usual. We stopped by the park. She swung on the swings, smiling at me every time she looked up. "Mom, are you happy?" "Yes," I said. "I did the right thing." She tilted her head. "So that means you won, right?" I sat beside her. "It is not about winning or losing. It is finally taking back the respect I deserved." She nodded, then leaned her head on my shoulder. "I respect you too, Mom." I held her close, feeling peace stretch out like the road ahead. And I understood something. I had not just reclaimed my job or rebuilt a department. I had rebuilt myself.